want to make 3 points that suggest why it was important, and it remains important, that a cybersecurity initiative focus on North Carolina. In many ways, even though North Carolina is an East Coast state, I still think of it as indicative of the heartland of America, because most of the big trends, the intersections, the contradictions, the tensions in America play out in North Carolina. It's a state that's becoming increasingly metropolitan. The Charlotte metropolitan area and the Research Triangle metropolitan area are among the top 20 or so in the United States now. Political power, economic power is increasingly consolidated in these big metro areas. But at the same time, this remains one of the most rural states in the nation. It's the 9th largest state, and I think the last census said that with the exception of Texas, there are more rural residents in North Carolina than any other particular state. And so, so it's a state that's switched from being a biracial society to a multi-ethnic society with the in-migration of Spanish-speaking people over the last 2 decades. And so what this has done politically is made North Carolina one of the most competitive states in the nation. And let me break it down a little. So the first thing to say about North Carolina is that it has a long ballot. So in a presidential election year, we also elect a governor, several members of what are known as the Council of State, just like the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, other statewide offices. Every seat in the U.S. House of Representatives comes up for election this year. And so does every seat. All 170 seats in the North Carolina legislature are up for election. So any interruption, any hacking or any intrusion into the North Carolina voting system, electoral system, that might be aimed at the presidential election also could have some interruption and disruptive effects on state government and state politics. And as you know, this year in particular, because it's a year ending in 0, the census is taking place, and so the legislature that is elected this November will be in charge of redistricting in 2012. And so what happens in this election year has a ripple effect, politically speaking, beyond. So the first thing to say is a long ballot. Second thing to say is that even though North Carolina on those big maps, the red and blue maps of America, tends to appear as a red state over the last couple of decades, it is anything but. It's a very competitive state. Like much of America, the largest growth recently in voter identification is unaffiliated voters. And so this state has about 1/3 or a little more than 1/3 of its voters registered as Democrats, about 30% registered as Republicans, and another 30 to 33, 34% registered unaffiliated. That can be deceptive. Most of those unaffiliated voters are not moderate, middle of the road voters. Some of them tend to be more Republican. Some of them tend to be more Democratic. And so the state is polarized, much as the nation is polarized. But let me give you a little bit of history. I and my family moved to North Carolina in 1972. It's a good baseline to work from, because it was in 1972 with the Nixon landslide election that Senator Jesse Helms was first elected to the United States Senate, a Republican, and Governor James Holzhauer, a Republican, was elected governor. That was the break with the old Southern solid Democratic Party tradition. So since 1972, there have been 12 presidential elections in North Carolina as in the nation. Republicans have won 10 of them. Democrats, Carter and Obama, have won 2 of them. But during those same elections, same voters on the same day, those 12 elections, North Carolina has elected 8 Democratic governors and 4 Republican governors. There were 6 elections in this period in which North Carolina voted Republican on the presidential side and Democratic on the gubernatorial side. Same voters, same day. And so it's a complex state, very competitive. One more point. North Carolina has been ground zero in many respects for almost 40 years in issues having to do with ballot access, gerrymandering, redistricting, and voter suppression or voter voting rules and regulations. So as far back as 1985 with Thornburg versus Jingles, and in the mid-1990s with Shaw v. Reno, North Carolina issues rose to the Supreme Court. Issues that arose in North Carolina reached the Supreme Court over how to assure, or not so much assure, Black voters power through redistricting. More recently, since the early 2000 teens, Republicans took over the legislature in 2010, and by 2013 had redistricted to the max, had used their power to redistrict the state to maximize Republican strength. And that has resulted in several new issues arising in both state courts and federal courts. And North Carolina has been at the center of the shift of redistricting issues from racial issues to political issues. I defer to Karen Brinson Bell and to others to talk about the security issues and the voting regulation issues. But let me just say that the state got a scare in 2016 with the crashing, I guess that's the right word, of the poll books in Durham County. The investigation, as I understand it, afterwards showed human error, not foreign or outside interference. But the state is on guard, and it's in some ways really tense about how we're going to have an election of credibility and integrity and credit, and that the voters will accept with mail-in ballots and other techniques. So this is a state that, as we head toward the general election of 2020, has this competitive political history, this long ballot, and this history of being the center of key issues having to do with redistricting and voting rules. And so I wanted to give you that perspective, because those folks who are coming after me will give you more of the details, but I wanted to give you that overarching context so that you understand that this is a really important discussion to have in North Carolina.